What's up, everybody? So we're back out in the shop, and today we're going to go ahead and put the handle scales that we made on the knife that we made and make one whole knife. So let's go ahead, jump into it, get it knocked out. Alright, so what we want to go ahead and do is take and just place the knife onto the handle scales to kind of get an idea of where we want it. And then we're going to take and draw the outline of the knife. I like to use a Sharpie. It puts a nice bold line on the handle scales. And it gives me enough room for where I want to be able to cut. What we're going to go ahead and do is take one of these smaller clamps and just clamp the back side of it so that we can make sure that the first two holes that we're going to drill through are able to be drilled through. And I'm just using a 3/16 drill bit on this. A lot of the pins that I use are 3/16 pins. And on this knife I decided that I'm going to go with hollow pins throughout the whole entire thing. So after we get the first two in, we can go ahead and take the clamp off, drill the last one. And then after that, we're going to go ahead and do the lanyard hole. And this is a 1/4 inch lanyard hole. And we're going to use a 1/4 inch lanyard tube. Go ahead and get it cut out on the bandsaw. And I like to cut as much off as possible. Some people want to be able to grind back to the actual shape of the handle scale, but I want to cut as much off as possible so I can do the least amount of work on the belt grinder as possible. We're just shaving any excess off to make the actual final shaping of the handle easier. Now what we got to do is a very important part. We got to shape the front of the handle scales. You cannot mess with this after it is glued up. You got to do it beforehand. So we're going to go ahead and take a 400 grit belt and shape them. We're going to round them over a little bit, make sure they're nice and smooth, just like that right there. And then we're going to go to the next step, which is hand sanding them. So I ground it with the 400 grit belt. Now I'm taking 150 grit sandpaper right here, sanding it, and then I'm going to go to a 320 grit, and then a 500 grit, and then a 1000 grit. Now what we're going to do here is take and just drill holes in the back of it for just epoxy. This is just so that there's an extra area for mechanical bond whenever we go to actually glue up the scales. You don't have to do that step, it's just a personal preference. Now we take acetone and wipe down everything. You want to get any greases and oils and everything off of everything so that whenever you do your glue up, and I'm using my 5-minute epoxy from JB Weld, but you want to make sure that whenever you do your glue up that you don't want to have anything hindering your mechanical bond, like oils and stuff on your hands. And I do go ahead and put a little bit of epoxy in the pin holes before I put the pins in, just to add a little extra to make sure that there's no gapping or any areas where it could be missing any epoxy. And I don't go crazy whenever I'm putting epoxy on here. I put just enough to make it make sense. I don't like having a whole bunch of squeeze out, so I put as much as what's necessary. And if you notice, I have gloves. I was able to find some gloves and purchase them, so I have them now. This was a lot easier because I didn't get epoxy all over my hands. And whenever I'm putting these clamps on, I'm not over tightening them. I'm just putting enough pressure to make sure that they are where they need to be. And then we take and clean any excess with the acetone. So we got a nice glue up on there. And now we're going to go ahead and cut off the excess on the pins, just on the bandsaw. That way we don't have to grind them down on the belt grinder. And one of y'all mentioned on a previous video that I was pretty brave for not taping up the blade whenever I started doing the sanding and shaping of the handles. I decided on this one I want to go ahead and tape it, so that was a good point. And the first step in the way I shape my handles, I go ahead and make sure everything is square. So I'd flatten the sides down. And then I go ahead and start rounding the scales. That's all I'm doing here. I'm just pivoting it and rocking it back and forth to get that initial round on there before I go to the next step. And this is just the way that I contour my handles. You don't have to do it this way. It's just my personal preference. So once we've rounded it a little bit, we're going to go ahead and get it shaped back to the actual tang itself. So take and smooth off any excess epoxy and any excess handle material and get it all the way back to where it's square with the tang. That's what I'm doing right here. The next step is one that y'all don't see very often. So this is me taking it to my oscillating spindle sander. Some people call it a drum sander. This is with an 80 grit drum. And I'm just going into that finger choil and making sure that I get it as smooth as possible. And this will get it very smooth, as you'll see here in a second. Now we're going to go ahead and do the next step of contouring, and that is actually rounding the edges. And what I'll do is I'll put a 45-degree angle on most of the edges and then just start slowly rounding them out. And I like to do about 95% of my shaping on the belt grinder and about 5% with hand sanding. That way it's just doing final stuff, cleaning up lines, things like that. But I will do a lot of this on the belt grinder. You got to be careful doing that though, because you could take off too much material and you cannot put the material back. And the particular woods that I'm working with, they work real well when it comes to this belt grinder and hand sanding. The black palm and the Padauk, they are an absolute amazing wood to work with when it comes to shaping your handles. So if y'all haven't, y'all should try some of this out. That's what we get just off of the belt grinder alone. Now we're going to go through and do some work with the hand sanding. I start with, on this particular wood, at 500 grit, and then I go up to 1000 grit from there. And that's really all I need on this particular wood. It just does well with the 500 and 1000, and that's it. I don't have to start at 150 or anything and work my way up. All I got to do is just go with 500, go to 1000, and it's good. And then we're going to take the buffing wheel with the green compound on it and give it a great buff. I did not put this in boiled linseed oil because I don't want these woods getting any darker than they are. And boiled linseed oil tends to make woods get a way darker tone. So that's why I'm just going straight to buff, and that's it. Now it's time to put an edge on it. And what we're going to go ahead and do is use the belts that I have for my 1x30. This first belt is a 600 grit belt that is technically made for sharpening. It's just a fine belt. You can buy these kits off of Amazon. I'll leave a link for it in the description. This is going to be an 800 grit belt, and the first belt I went against the rotation of the belt, and the second belt, which is this 800, I go with the rotation of the belt. And then on the 1000 grit, I go with the rotation of the belt as well. And I find that this just gives me a really good burr when it comes to sharpening. I used to go against the rotation all the way up until the leather strapping belt, but now I go with it. Same thing on the leather strapping belt, we go with the rotation. Put a great edge on it. I love this system. It's an inexpensive way to get an edge on a knife in 5 minutes without a lot of work. So we got that razor sharp, shaven sharp. I'm going to go ahead and do a little sharpness test that y'all might like. It's one of my favorite ones. I don't show y'all very often, but just a nice little paper slice. There you go, guys. Alright, well, that's the end of this one. That guy right there. Just in case that last clip didn't show you how sharp it was. Check that out. How do y'all think that turned out? Got our liners in there, the liner in between, the black palm and the Padauk. We did all hollow pins, and then we did a hollowed lanyard hole. Look at the finish on that blade. See what I'm talking about with that Hamon line? Right there. All the way across there. It turned out absolutely awesome. I like the hammered finish. I love the finish on the actual knife, the whole thing, but this is going to be my EDC for the next few months. I'm going to go ahead and make a really good sheath for it and just keep it on my belt. Cut everything with it, open everything with it, chop everything with it. See how it goes, check out that edge retention, and then kind of go from there. But guys, thank y'all for coming along for this whole vlog series. We're going to be starting another one tomorrow, so y'all be looking forward to that. And guys, if you haven't yet, give this video a thumbs up, share this video, or a video I've done in the past that might be a favorite. And if you haven't yet, bottom corner, hit the little subscribe button right there so you get notified of whenever we start the next build. Plus guys, I just want to thank y'all for the amount of support y'all are giving me and the amount of subscribers that are coming on. It just makes me want to do this even more. So I'm going to keep creating content. Y'all just keep coming back and watching. Guys, thank y'all for coming by. Thank y'all for checking that beautiful thing out. Y'all have an amazing day. Catch y'all next time.